Black Socrates. All I ask is that you think.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and welcome to the Just My 3 Cents podcast, a live interactive podcast where you can jump on with me and make this podcast as we discuss the difficult issues of race, sex, and culture. I wanted to try an open show. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been with you, been pretty busy. I didn't think I was going to do a show this week, so I think the inconsistency has hurt me a little bit because I haven't been able to promote these shows as need be. But, hopefully people can catch some gems on them later. I really hope that for this open dialogue, again, it was kind of a last minute idea because I didn't know I was going to be able to do a show today. For those who don't know, have a lot of multi-hustles, if you will, and one of my hustles is vending for the sporting events here in Atlanta. And I didn't realize the Braves were playing in the afternoon. So I thought we had an evening game. So I wasn't planning on doing a show. And we ended up having an afternoon game in the hot sun at 100 degrees. So pretty fun. But I was like, okay, well, I got a few minutes. I'm going to jump on last minute, put together a show, see if I can make an open dialogue, see if I can convince some of you to hit the link and join me. Because although this is called Just My 3 Cents, ultimately I would love to get your 3 cents on various issues. It could be something that's happening now, something in the past. Again, I go by Montoya, aka Black Socrates. I would love to philosophize on different issues of race, sex, and culture. I do have a couple of ideas that I'm going to bring to the table. Again, I hope that y'all would jump on and give us your 3 cents before. This would probably be a short broadcast, but I just wanted to put something out because I had missed the last couple of weeks. So this is not my usual time as well. So I'm pretty sure that's not helping because I originally was looking to do this an hour ago. I am a mobile notary, just highlight that. And I had a notary, so I pushed this back an hour. So that probably didn't help with getting people available to watch. If they were tuned in or looking to do it at 8 o'clock, they probably say, hey, he just didn't come on, which is, in a sense, unfortunately, the second week in a row. All right, so I'll pay the price. And I'll try to be more consistent. Typically, I try to go Wednesday nights, but sometimes I do have to move to Thursday based on my schedule. But either way, y'all can catch the broadcast later. With that said, a couple of ideas. If you saw the promotions for this one day, because again, I didn't know I was going to do this show. I just happened to pick up on the Afro pick. Some of you may have not known what that was a reference to when I said I was going to do this open dialogue show. The reference to the Afro pick that was unveiled on Juneteenth. I didn't even look at the place because I saw the picture of this thing being unveiled, floating around on social media, and people were kind of like, really? Like, we're really, unveiling a Black Power Afro pick as some type of semblance to represent Juneteenth. And I remember looking at it initially and thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm not even finna get caught up in that madness, if you will. And I'm not saying this is something that was, just all over the internet, but I just kept seeing it on my timeline. And it was basically people making reference to the Afro pick being unveiled at Juneteenth for the most part as a mockery of some type of celebration of Juneteenth, especially with the idea of Juneteenth is now a national holiday. Eric, I see you in the background, brother. Just keep in mind, with the thing I sent you, if you just want to watch, you can watch from the other links. Just want to throw that out because I know sometimes you don't like to actually come on. So when you hit the link, I'm usually bringing you on. So if you can catch that, I love for the fact that you're watching. But the way I send it to you, this is the link to join the show. So I know the last couple of times you were just wanting to listen and tune in, which I do appreciate. So just I can't see you, so I assume you're just listening. So that's fine. But just keep in mind that when I send it to you, the first 2 links I send you, if you just want to watch, that's the way you watch. The link you're hitting is the one in which you actually join and talk. So keep that in mind. I'm glad to have you on. Want to bring you on. I just know typically you just enjoy the show, which is fine with me. But back to the Afro pick at the unveiling of Juneteenth. Some African American artists worked on that Afro pick. Here's the thing: the Afro pick unveiled wherever as some type of artistic work in the manner. Because again, I want to give credit. I'm sorry, don't remember the brother. I just briefly saw the brother's name, so I didn't memorize it or whatever. But the brother that did it, if this was unveiled for any other reason other than Juneteenth, we actually would be applauding it, right? Just as a beautiful artwork of art for whatever reason that this brother, basically was commissioned, if you will, to have this put up. But we find silliness in it, right? Now that we have Juneteenth, which what happens when it comes to the Juneteenth celebration, what I saw on social media, again, now that it is a national holiday, everybody gets most people get a federal holiday and people get days off for it or whatever. And so now that it is a national holiday, then we're like, okay, what next? I know on the last show that I actually did, which has been a couple of weeks ago, the sisters that jumped on the show with me, and remember, you can jump on too. Hit the link if you want to jump on. But the sisters that jumped on the show with me, they were talking about that ice cream that I think Walmart put out or whatever. And so, to a degree, the commercialization of Juneteenth is now being scrutinized nationally. I get it, right? Juneteenth, in a sense, was quote unquote ours, and now that it's national, it seems relatively exploitive with something as silly as an Afro pick being represented somehow as a symbol of it, which makes no sense when you think about what Juneteenth is for. So I get the concern and how it looks like a mockery and seems very silly, but to the ladies' points who came on my show, which I thought was pretty dope because I hadn't thought about it this way. Because here's the reality: I don't even think we should concern ourselves with the Afro pick, the ice cream. That stuff is not important. I'm just giving you my 3 cents. You can come on and say otherwise. But I thought the young ladies that jumped on the show a couple of weeks ago when they were talking about the ice cream, they were a fan of the ice cream. One sister said she was running around trying to get it or whatever. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I guess there was a Juneteenth ice cream, like a red velvet something ice cream that was, that Walmart released at the release, in celebration of Juneteenth or whatever. I definitely saw that floating on the timeline. But what these sisters said, they were highlighting that at the end of the day, any type of notoriety can be a good thing when you think about what the history of Juneteenth is. And the reality is, once something gets noticed as a national holiday, that's part of it. Part of it is getting more awareness, because awareness, once more people are aware, if there are potential policies, if you will, and the only policy that comes to my mind is, there's this push by the ADOS, African Descendants of Slaves, the ADOS movement, in reference to reparations. So even highlighting history to say, hey, this is what happened, for those who may push for reparations, there could be a connection. So more notoriety, even if it seems silly, as such as ice cream, because what people are going is, oh, look at Walmart finna make money off of us. Like, that's the way that people see it. But however, the bigger point, I'll say bigger point because I agree with the sisters that came on my show. I will keep highlighting for those watching. You can jump on this show with me as well. Just hit the link below, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. But what those sisters said, hey, they made a reference to, because the conversation we were having was 2 weeks ago, we were kind of talking about, I had put up a joke on MD Fridays that, in a sense, made a reference to gays, if you will. So we ended up having a dialogue about it. But what the sister said, matter of fact, it was DeAsia, which many of y'all know her from the Mental Dialogue Talk Show on Saturdays. She's one of my Queen of Intellects members. But what she said was, she was like, it's the same way that, in a sense, the LGBTQIA community gets notoriety for Pride Month. And so all the notoriety ends up being an assist. And she's thought that we as African Americans, instead of being upset and mad at Walmart making an ice cream, or I would even throw this Afro pick that hadn't been out by the time we did it, but I would even throw out the Afro pick, even though it seems like somewhat of a silly mockery. The idea that people are saying, we want to figure out a way to celebrate this event, the awareness of what happened with Juneteenth could eventually lead to more awareness, that it could turn into policy, because we've heard reparations. I know I've heard it at least since the 80s, probably been pushed even sooner than that. I'm pretty sure the first groups that were pushing way prior to ADOS being the more, in a sense, the prominent group that pushes for reparations now. And there's plenty others or whatever, but I will say I like their approach. It's a very legal approach. And despite, maybe some of the knocks against, kind of how they're moving as far as the togetherness. Ultimately, their approach, I think, is a very smart legal approach. Don't think it'll be happening in a sense overnight, but they've had some successes in California and I think North Carolina, if you will. Not to get too deep into that history, but I'm just highlighting and agree with Deasia when she says, hey, don't get caught up in and upset, because it's kind of a waste of our time, in my opinion, to be upset about, whether this ice cream comes out. Like Walmart had to take it off the shelf because our culture, if you will, got so upset. And she says, her being part of the LGBTQ community says, similar to how we get notice for Pride Month by having a flag or whatever. She says all of these examples, even if it is companies that figure out a way to make a buck off of it, it's still notoriety that eventually could lead to some policy. So I thought that was a well thought out thought from that sister, and I think it would apply even to this Afro pick. And like I said, if you just tuned in, if you saw the Afro pick, and I can agree that it's somewhat of a mockery to even think of an Afro pick, quote unquote, Black Power, in reference to Juneteenth, because they're two different time periods. So it's not that I'm unaware of it being seen as a mockery or whatever. However, I agree with the sister when she says all attempts at recognition can be favorable, because at the end of the day, if there's going to ever be a push for policy such as reparations, if you will, it can all be tied to people being more aware of why reparations is deserved. And I would highlight what happened at Juneteenth would be one of those reasons. I got the sister Michelle, who was dope as heck last time when she jumped on here. What's up, Queen? Glad to have you on. I'm assuming that's you. How you doing, Queen? Go ahead and cover this thing, because this is an open dialogue. It don't have to be what I'm talking about. I got a couple other topics I might bring up, but where you want to go, I don't know if you want to join me or bring up something else. But either way, I'm just doing an open dialogue. I didn't really have a big agenda today. I just skipped the last 2 weeks, and I didn't want to skip when I had a chance to do a show. So what you got, Queen?
It's all good. I wanted to talk about the Afro pick.
Oh yeah, please do.
And just, I know it's not Juneteenth anymore, but just like celebrating Black people in general. I think a lot of the disconnects and a lot of the corporate issues when it comes to celebrating Juneteenth specifically is that we don't celebrate Black people in general. And so we got people doing Afro pics. We got people having watermelon and fried chicken in the cafeterias. Right. We got people doing all sorts of types of stuff, right? And it's no, it was one that really got me. It was the military. It was some military branch. They were singing, in the beginning of like the Lion King, that song, the circle, it was like the Circle of Life song.
Okay.
It was like they were singing it in chorus.
As if it was some type of celebration or something?
Yes, it was for Juneteenth. They were singing the beginning of the Lion King, by Sawing. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to embarrass myself like that. But we all know how the Lion King start. They were singing that song. And so I was like, what's going on here? But I think that the issue that America is running into is that there has never been a time that I can recall in 33 years where we as a nation have celebrated Black people. So the only thing that they can think of is Afro pics. The only thing that they can think of is watermelon and fried chicken, like stereotypes. That's the only thing that they can think of, because they like Black history is a joke. So they don't learn about anything that we do, culture, accomplishments, nothing. So that was my take on the Afro pick.
No, I respect that. Let me throw this out, because I think it relates to, in my opinion, similar to what you were on with Deasia a couple of weeks ago when I did the last show, and y'all kind of brought up a brilliant point that I was highlighting prior to you jumping on. Is I just want to throw out a perspective. I haven't thought about it, because reality is I'm not moved by these if you want to call them missteps. I think they're definitely missteps. Partly for a lot of the reasons that you just said. Is just complete unawareness, because there has just, for example, there's never been an appropriate place for us, in a sense, put in American history. I always highlight that Carter G. Woodson, father of Negro history, if you will, the father of Black history, his goal, even in starting Negro History Week, which he started, so many years ago. His whole goal was that eventually that it would be absorbed into American history, and that there would be no need for Negro history. Unfortunately, I've always said, knowing what his ultimate goal was, I think it was 1973 or 76 that they expanded it to Black History Month. And just me, at least from my personal understanding of Carter G. Woodson's goal, I'm like, he probably turned over in his grave at the expansion of Black History Month, because his whole goal was, hey, we've been very much a part of American history, and it should just be included. So he spent a lot of his time digging up these artifacts and these different various heroes that were very part of American history, with the idea that they would just be incorporated into the school system. So go ahead.
Well, but the problem is, and you can see what, like CRCT, right? Critical race theory, that's trying to be taught, and you have full states just opting out, right? I think Utah was one of the first states to drop, right? We're not teaching no Black history at all, right?
So let me say this real quick, because I'm very particular about this. We did a very good show on CRT. And so I like to make the clarity, because CRT is actually a misnomer, and I don't like because that label was put on. Because basically what you're calling it, you're saying Black history. Let's be fair to what CRT actually is, critical race theory, which is a graduate level theory that theory is not taught in schools, but we've allowed the politicians to mislabel it. And so I just like to correct.
So as far as teaching more Black history in school, right, on like the elementary school level, or even on the high school level, like there's full on blown states that are just opting out completely, 100%. And I went to the school in Ohio, which is, you got your pockets of Black. So you got your Dayton, you got a little bit of Cincinnati, you got a little bit of Columbus. But in middle school, I was in Wilmington, Ohio. It's like 3 by 5 mile long little city. And I remember in February we did, one week of Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, bare minimum. And then for the rest of the week, we were talking about Anne Frank. We reread the diary of Anne Frank, and that was our Black History Month. But I think I got lost in track as far as where I was going with that. With the whole teaching more about Black history, and having more people be more exposed to our history in this country and culture throughout the diaspora, right? It becomes problematic because a lot of the documented, shareable, videoed and photographed incidences, it starts to become problematic because it wasn't that long ago. Because now you have to explain to little Bobby why Graham is throwing books at this 9-year-old girl, right? And so, like, there are people who were alive, Black and white, who participated in some of these events that would be shared in school, like the Little Rock Nine or Ruby Bridges or whatever, and they have to be accountable for those actions.
So let me say this. This is a challenge that I brought when we did the show on critical race theory. And let me bring Emil on the thing as well. So one challenge I will always caution against. Oh, Emil, he must have realized I was about to bring him on. He jumped off. This brother's brilliant. This brother's brilliant too. So, Emil, if you're still watching, please jump back on. We were about to bring you back on. We were about to bring you on with us. I would love to have you join the conversation. So I'll just highlight this: is that we, as African Americans, I would say, because of our experience, we're fully expecting that would be the gist of the history that's delivered, or that would be a big part of the history that's delivered. I would actually caution. Oh, here he comes. I'm gonna bring him on with us. So I would caution that history, people that we, because a lot of times we have to find out our history right on our own, right? Because it's not going to be in the school system to the extent that it should be. And just let me side note this as a thing. So there's plenty of schools in the North, in the Midwest and higher, that they were never teaching any of this stuff anyway, because there's not hardly any black people in some of those states. So they don't teach this stuff anyway. They're not even opting out. They were never teaching it, just to highlight the reality prior to quote unquote CRT becoming an issue politically. This is a side note. But back to the point I wanted to make, and I want to hear, Emil, both of your thoughts on this. But the reality is we have to be careful, in my opinion, of what we expect history to be. It shouldn't even be a focus on all of those bad things. I'm with Carter G. Woodson in the extent that there were all these beautiful and highlight things where we were very valuable parts of history that are not being shared. Because if you think of the American history that we've been told, and all countries do this, we don't understand his story. Your story is told in a way to uplift your country, whatever country does it. You do the same thing in your family. In your family, if you're going to share something that, let's say, you have value in your family name, if you're sharing what your ancestors or just your immediate grandparents did when they were young because it brings your family pride, I promise you, you tell the best stories. You don't tell the worst stories because you want to instill your children with the sense of pride of, hey, carry our name with pride. So I hear that point, but I will say it is a mistake to think that's the type of history that has to be taught. I'm just mad that we didn't find out about Hidden Figures until the movie came out. That should have been a part of history already. Emil, your thoughts, and I'll go back to Michelle.
Yeah, brother. So, great discussion. I'm glad to hear that we're listening to ourselves when it comes to where history belongs and the context of history. This is the part that I think we miss in America, that our story has a richness that is being truncated. It's being cut off before it's fully developed. And what America has done as a nation, what we fail to understand as Black people, is that the richness of our story lends itself to the greatness of the nation if we were willing to share the story. But the problem is that America is not willing to confront whatever shame it feels over any part of our story, much less the good part, right? So if your context, Montoya, is that a nation tells its best stories to itself to lift itself up and make itself wonderful, then the other side to that equation is that the best stories are not being told, because the best stories belong to so many people, especially Black people in America, who have contributed to the success of the nation.
Absolutely.
So
I think you heard me saying what you're saying now, but go ahead.
So where do we go from here? This is the problem that America's facing. It doesn't know how to tell any of the stories of its people it has oppressed, good or bad, because it knows that every bit of those stories is laced with the kind of story they don't want to tell ever. That's the problem. They can't edit out the bad parts, because the bad parts are literally part of the good parts, right? And so this lie that every nation tells itself can be told, every family tells itself for that matter, can be told in a way that makes sense to the family because they have context. We don't have context. Africans were brought here. They were enslaved. And out of that enslavement, there's no good from that, but there are good things that happened despite that. But you can't tell the one without the other. And this nation refuses to understand how to deal with its own shame over the origin of those good stories.
Good
And
point.
yeah, so like real quick to his point, because I was about to jump in before he made the second part of the point. As far as the good stories, right? And so the good stories always have that back end type situation. So, example, I was talking to children that weren't mine, and and I was talking about Black Wall Street, right? And so I knew what I was getting into because these are smart kids and they're gonna ask me a whole bunch of questions. And then I just got to plead the fifth because I'm not telling the babies what happened. Because what happens is you talk about Black Wall Street, or you talk about like Marcus Garvey and, you know, things that happened 100 years ago, like literally 100 years ago, like 1920. And then they're like, okay, well, what happened? And I'm not going to be the one to tell the babies about Black Wall Street or Santa Claus or, Tooth Fairy. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to break the children, especially because some of them are mixed, right? I'm not doing it. And then when it comes to other successes, like the whole light bulb, like the invention of the light bulb, a Black man created the filament for the light bulb. But then you ask what happened to this Black man, and it gets real dark real fast.
Well, it's because you're tied. Y'all are because we are tied to the struggle to the extent that you think that's the way you have to tell the story. It's not hard to tell because this is what you do in your own family. You don't tell the darkest parts of your family and expect your kids to be okay. We know how to tell the stories without that. It's not hard. We're just so used to thinking it has to be done that way. No nation does that. No nation does that. You think there's no nation, there's plenty of nations with terrible history. You will not go through their history books and see them telling the story in the way that we're suggesting right now. They're like, I'll give you a quick example. I remember I had this when I was real young, this South African guy, white guy, was talking about how history was taught, how the American Revolution was taught to him as a South African white kid. He said it was one line in his book that said the America got their freedom. He said he didn't know nothing about what that looked like as a South African kid, because if you know how South Africa, British run South Africa, so it was a one-line thing. Like that is how history is supposed to be used. And I know I'm right, because if you have any type of a connected family, and all families have good and bad history, I promise you the bad history is not being shared with the babies. That's not how his story is told. You have to understand what history is for. History is a tool to have you more dedicated to your family or your country. That's why his story gets told that way. So we make it hard because we've been on this bad end of it, and we're like, oh, they're afraid to tell that story. You're right, because nobody tells history like that nowhere in the world. And it's like we need to wake up to that. And what I would highlight, and I think, let me ask you this, Camille, and I want to hear your thoughts as well, Michelle. But the reality is, I'm not saying you're wrong, Emil, in the fact that the country is afraid to handle the shame. That's not what I'm telling you you're wrong about. What I am sharing with you is, since it is our reality, then it becomes obligated that we do our best job to do what Carter G. Woodson wanted to do. The country did not do it. They turned it into a Black History Month, which our history can't be limited to a month, since that's what they've done. You know, I don't like talking about they that much. So in the meantime, when you understand the importance of your Black children seeing examples of themselves in history, which we all typically agree, anytime I do these shows, that they won't see enough of themselves in public school education. Now that we're in the information age, I can now wait for Emil to put out this amazing plate and make sure my children see it, because that's the answer versus I don't like complaining about what the country will or will not do. I want to highlight a meal in this amazing play and make sure every Black child sees it. Do you see what I'm saying as a realistic fix? I'm not saying don't worry about what the country does. I'm not saying that, but I don't like the gist of our time being spent on it when they keep showing us time and time again they're not going to add the history properly. Your thoughts, Emil?
So yes, the answer is yes. We cannot count on this nation to do what's right by us, even if it means lying to us to tell our own story. We need to be very clear what that means. There are major repercussions to the admission that America will not tell us our own story. And the first major repercussion from that is, in my opinion, that somebody's got to fill the gap before Hollywood and media do. And we haven't acknowledged the first part to get to the second. The first part is we're trying to force a nation that has resented our presence even as much as it has loved the product of that presence for its entire existence. So we're saying we're going to force you to do what's unnatural to you. and because they have responded with, sure, and here's the version of your truth that we can accept. And they continually do this. They take our heroes, Muhammad Ali, Dr. King, who were villains in their time, and turn them into heroes they can tolerate. So they're bastardizing our story to capitulate and give us something that looks like what they interpret we want.
So
Here's the problem.
Hold on. I don't know that they interpret what we want. They do it for their own, right? But here's the thing: is to your point is made. It's very valid. What I'm saying is, we say, give us Black history. They say, sure, here's our version of it that we can tolerate. I'm tired of saying that. It ain't that hard for us to give our children that, because here's what
I agree.
So,
that's where my point was going. Right. That's exactly where my point is going. Right. But we have to first acknowledge they're not going to do it.
Jump back to them, because that's what I just said. We now
know it's an acknowledgement on our part to say we should not expect them to do it.
There we go.
But a gap that needs to be filled between the expectation no longer being an expectation and Hollywood still doing what Hollywood does. And that's the gap that we have to acknowledge exists to fill it.
So what happens is, if we become diligent in filling the history gap anyway, then that's also becomes a residual of it, because we're very aware that he who controls the images controls the mind. So that's the bigger attack than anything, right? And so I'm with you there. I was just saying that's the next logical step, in my opinion. But go ahead, Michelle.
I just wanted to say one thing before we got too far away from it, because Emil was kind of touching on it, but I wanted to state the potential dangers of not having the bad parts, right? Because what happens is that kids who only get the good parts, kids, black, white, whatever, it doesn't matter. When they only get the good parts, you have to use history as a looking glass to understand the context of what's going on. So current events. I always hated in a history class when we had current events, because I never was like, what does current events have to do with history? Until I was like in high school and like I got it, right? So within history, you have current events. And so we have Black history, and we're talking about all the excellence, all the inventions, everything we've contributed to this country, whether it be military, whether it be scholarship, whether it be whatever, right? If you have all of this excellence and you look at Black people as a whole, just numbers wise, just as far as net worth values, just as far as just like what is portrayed now, the lens can fix it. But what happens is, when you only get the good, you're like, okay, well, these people are lazy. You start to reinforce stereotypes when you only have the good of 50, 60 years ago plus.
Now, how do you reinforce the stereotypes? Here it is. I want to be clear. I'm not saying I know how I said it, so I can understand why you received it away. So I want to be clear. So I'm not saying only tell the bad, because again, if you recall before you jumped on, I was saying that even bad exploitation of Juneteenth could still bring some awareness that eventually could lead to policy for reparations. So I can't be a fan of reparations and not being willing to look at, here's why you need it. So I'm definitely understanding that there's a place for it. So I don't want to. I'm just highlighting that when we lead with, well, the reason they want to take it because it's going to make them first deal with their shame. I just know, because we're so tied to struggle, that we're so focused on the negative, even as a culture, that it's not healthy, because we don't understand how. I was making the point of, we don't understand how his story is technically used. Yeah. So I did sound like I was saying only tell the good. So to be clear, I'm not saying only tell the good, but just know that in what needs to be added, it's the stuff that Carter G. Woodson wanted, not just us thinking, oh, they just don't want to know how bad things were. Like, that's how we look at it in kind of a linear block statement that we make as a culture, because we fail to understand how history is used, because we're the only here's the reality. We're the only culture that has a gap based on what happened to us in history. Nowhere else in the world, even in cultures that don't even write still to this day, they still have a verbal history they pass down, because all cultures understand his story and how it should be used. I'm not surprised based on our own history why we don't understand it. So I'm trying to bring it to the table. Let's understand how history should be used. And there's a lot of good that just needs to be added to the context. And here's my last comment. I'll let you jump back in. I wrote a piece a long time ago called Ain't No Niggas in America. I got it from something Richard Pryor, my favorite comedian. Speaking of comedy, 2 weeks ago, Michelle. So for those who still mad at me for my joke from a couple of weeks ago, when you're raised on Richard Pryor, ain't too many jokes gonna seem bad to me. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that's the context of where I come from with history. But the reason I called it that name, I'm about to let James jump on this thing with me. Thank you, James, for jumping on. But the reason I called it Ain't No Niggas in America, because Richard Pryor, when he took his first trip and visited maybe 3 to 4 countries, maybe more, to different countries within the African continent, when he came back, he actually stopped using the word nigga in his routine, because he realized while he was there, as much as he loved the word and used it all the time in America, he hadn't used it. And he said, I looked around, I realized I hadn't used it because I don't see none. And so that one trip was so powerful to him. And one line that was the basis of that piece, Ain't No Niggas in America, was this philosophy I came up when I was in college, was you do not respect a people or a person whose history you do not see as equal to your own. You do not respect a people or a person whose history you do not see as equal to your own. So I would say to you, Michelle, that the stereotypes live because there's not enough real history being told for others to see us as their equals. So if you tell more of the excellence, now you no longer have to believe this sense of laziness, because what happens, even General Grant said this after the Civil War, I've never seen a group of people who played the least role in their freedom than Black people, because he didn't know how many Blacks actually fought in the Civil War. He didn't know that. You see what I'm saying? So you get your narratives live when you don't know the excellence. That's why I suggested that's more important. James just jumped on, so I'm gonna jump to him. King, what you got, brother?
Dude, I just jumped in, so I'm a little lost. Where we talking?
Okay, I didn't know if you was jumping on, wanting to say something, so you can just hang on and start jumping in. Michelle, go ahead, Queen, and I'll let Emil come back on that.
Well, I think Emil had to say something, but I'm gonna say something real quick because it was like the last thing you said. As far as the General Grant quote, right? I currently live in Georgia. I'm originally from New York. I had the Ohio story. Just bear with me. I travel, right? So, when it comes to that quote, people will learn that quote before they learned about how many Black people fought in the Civil War, like in kindergarten. Yeah, right. Like they will teach the children that quote before they teach the kids about anything else.
I don't think any schools are teaching. Let's be honest. But I read the quote on my own years later. I don't think any schools.
No, I mean, I think I heard that like in high school, and it was in AP World History, but it wasn't.
It wasn't taught to you. Go ahead.
But
to be fair,
I don't remember learning that quote myself either. But
it's not gonna be taught to
interesting.
You. Through my own reading, but I feel you're still making a point though. I just wanted to be fair about that.
No, I mean, I did. Like I heard it. I don't know who said it. You said that Grant said it, so I'm just gonna say that Grant said it. Yeah, but so it was like AP World History, because I remember, because I got kicked out of that class for reasons like that. But it was just like there is so much with history, because history is a tool. You said it, right? It is a powerful tool because it gives a people and a nation identity.
Absolutely.
And when you have like the prison industrial complex, why would you tell Black people that they are great? Right.
And so the challenge is if every culture does it. So the challenge ends up being to us to make sure we do it for ourselves, because every culture does it for themselves. So the challenge just falls back on our culture to do it. I don't like talking about, to a degree, what they should be doing. I'm not saying don't keep history in school. I'm not a fan of them mislabeling Black history as CRT and taking it out of schools. I'm willing to call that what it is, but we watch how it played out politically. We should not be surprised, which should get us on our game about what we should be doing. I just wish that would be more of the push than talking about what they are doing or not.
I think as far as this conversation goes, and I didn't understand that prior to speaking, but I think as far as this conversation goes, you're kind of preaching to the choir a little bit, because
don't do it, so we're not doing it in our families. I do after school at a multicultural school, and I am always have them do extra effort to make sure, even at a school that makes an intentional, that every culture sees themselves. It's very intentional. It's an international school, so they're very intentional, more so than any other school I've been in a school program. But go ahead.
With the whole thing, and then I have a whole prop, so I'm gonna leave it in the middle of talk, and then I'll come back. One, you can't teach what you don't know. So generally, as a parent, if I didn't know Black history, I wouldn't be able to teach it to my child, no less anybody else. And two, I feel like, again, this group and the people that watch and participate in mental dialogue, we just, once we learn something, we go down these rabbit holes and we learn more. And as far as Black people, I think a lot of times we start with ourselves in some sense as far as discovery and context. So I don't think any of us would have issues with educating our children.
So the dialogue is to, in my opinion, to get away from the dialogue about what the country will not do. We started down that path. So if we get better at leaving that out of the conversation, then we can have better dialogues with our peers about how easy that is to do. So we do still have a step that we need to take, not so much you and I, but that even our dialogue improves to our peers. That's the challenge, because we're not doing enough of that.
You're right. I'm going to go get my prop. I got something to say about that, because it is a balance with that, especially with dealing with little boys that turn into big men. There's a balance. But prop. All right, I'll be back.
Emil, go ahead, brother.
Who, me?
I said Emil.
Oh.
So Montoya, I hear your point, but there's a bunch of things that I need to get out. So I'll try to do it quickly so we can continue the dialogue. The first thing that there is a nation that teaches the bad part of its history. Germany does that today about the Holocaust. They specifically teach it because it was so horrific. They don't want to repeat it, and they don't want the shame that came from them being the perpetrators of a Holocaust. They are fighting with their own neo-Nazi faction today because they didn't do a good enough job to teach all their people, because wrapped inside of that Holocaust was a lot of fatherland pride. So there are nations that do teach the bad parts of their history specifically to prevent repeating those parts of their history.
Yeah, I never said don't do that, because I said I know we can't get the reparations if you're hearing me say don't include the bad. That's not. I tried to.
No, you said earlier in this conversation, no nation.
I tried to clarify.
No nation says it doesn't say it's bad stuff, and I'm saying yes, there are some that do that, but it's usually very specific. But my point isn't about that. My point is that when you say Black people in America have to get on their game, first we have to recognize that our game was significantly disrupted from the ground up. It isn't simply like you're conscious enough to recognize that you need to get on game. I am, and all of the people who listen to you are. But as a group, we have been so disrupted in our ability to understand ourselves that for us to get on game is an intensive work by itself. Not to teach the history, to undo the damage that we are continually facing. The damage didn't stop in 1865. It didn't stop in 1968 with the passing of the Housing Discrimination Act. It didn't stop. It continues today. So the first step is we have to get ourselves back to a point where we can actually absorb our own story so that we can tell our own story in its proper context. That step is Mount Everest.
It doesn't take. It isn't. That's where
that step is Mount Everest.
That's where you're completely wrong at.
You think that so let me make sure I understand you. You think that getting us as a group of people on game is not Mount Everest?
It's absolutely not Mount Everest.
Okay, so explain to me how it's not Mount Everest, because I don't understand. Because if it's not Mount Everest, why aren't we doing it now?
Okay, because what the we you're talking about is a construct that was sold to us, and we're still speaking in a construct that's not real. So the construct that's not real is the construct of race that I did a show specifically on the social construct of race, in which I fully acknowledge there are real life consequences, life or death for us African Americans, because perception is reality. So this construct is a real life perception that is very real in this country. So I'm trying to be very clear so that it doesn't sound like I'm being dismissive of the fact that this construct can lead to life or death for us. I'm starting there. I'm setting this up to make the point that you're asking, but I want to make it loud and clear before I make the point, because you can't dismiss that I'm very aware that this construct can lead to life or death. It has historically, more so than now, but it still can have that consequence. So I want to be loud and clear. Do not dismiss this when I now tell you the reality is, because we've been taught this construct, we actually look at there should be a game that we as a racial group should be getting on. When you study history specifically, there is no group that moves by race in the manner that we're even speaking about, because it's not realistic. It's not realistic to expect a group to move by its race. It's not a real thing. It is something, it is literally the melanin of our skin. It's scientifically not true, but it was used effectively when race led to money, because it was used to finance this country on the back of our backs. So they made this construct because of the money. Who made the construct? Just the elite. The elite created a construct that they taught to not only America, but to the rest of the world. But who did the elite teach? Their own fellow white people, in which the elite wanted the resources. They wanted to ensure that most of their white people under them did not team up with other Africans. And so they made a difference that stopped that fear. So even when they created the construct, they knew it wasn't real. And so I'm highlighting all of this, that when you say, is it Mount Everest? No, it's not Mount Everest, because there should be no context that's tied to our entire race has to get this. What can happen, and I'm pretty sure you do this with your children, Emil, I'm pretty sure, based on the man I know you to be, that when you have children, because you had to figure this game out like I did at a little older age, I'm pretty sure you've helped your children figure it out sooner than how we figured it out. And so that's all it takes. All it takes is parents knowing the game and going to seek out media about children that looks like them and supplements the history we know they're not going to get in public schools. And I would be shocked. I don't know how your children are doing, but the man I know, I'm pretty sure they're doing very well. And I'm pointing it out because that's how groups move. They move within their family, and they get a few other families, and they all create a value system and become a culture within a culture. All groups are not monolithic. They're all different groups, and you only see certain groups be very well. So when you say it's a mountain, it's not a mountain when you understand that within your family, it's not a mountain. And that's how we got to speak to it. So when families understand that, we will elevate more people when more families start doing that.
I got a question that goes in my head. I really do, because you're saying each family should teach its own children the history of the people they're not a part of.
So I'm with Carter G. Wilson.
Black history is American. I'm with him too. But what I'm trying to understand is, I can teach my children about my family, but if I teach my children about your family, I'm now including them in a construct that shouldn't exist.
So Carter G. Wilson, I agree with Carter G. Wilson. Black history is American history. So does that not cover what you're asking me? Maybe we're misunderstanding.
So Okay, so this is where we diverge, because what I'm trying to understand, I get what you said about the preface with race is a construct created to create division and to create unity where division and unity shouldn't have existed.
Well, it was
That
created to
construct,
create. I'll make sure I make it clear. It was used to create division in order for the elite to secure resources. That's what I said. I don't know about the unity.
yeah, in the elite as a group does not exist but for the creation of itself, right? Like the
Okay.
same thing about race you can say about the elite. They are not born elite, they are created by a set of rules created by some people to make themselves better than others. So all of these social constructs are used to advantage some and disadvantage others. My point is, when you tell me as a man with a family to teach my children, the moment I teach them about not my family's history, and I specifically teach them about people who look like them, people who have the same basic features and or culture, because that's a good part of what we're trying to do, is model the behavior that our children need to demonstrate later in their life. We can't get them necessarily to model behavior of people that don't reflect who they are. So when I use Guyon Bluford, when I use Dr. Mae Jemison, when I use Frederick Douglass, people who are not in my family, people who are not George Washington, who are not Thomas Jefferson, who are not Thomas Edison, when I use people who look like my children, what you're saying is that doesn't constitute a historical truth because they're not connected to my family.
It's the background noise. It doesn't constitute a historical what? I didn't hear the word.
It doesn't constitute a historical truth because they're not part of my personal family.
I'm not trying to say that.
But that's the result of the logic you're using. If I use people who look like my children but are not my children's family, then they're part of a construct that is fictitious. And therefore there's no validity in using them in history.
Well,
hey, 1 second. Can Keon mute? He needs to mute.
Oh, that's him. That's me. I thought it was a mute.
Yeah, he has all the background noise,
Okay,
and I want to engage in this conversation.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you, Keon.
So yeah. So I'm saying that your family be responsible in showing your children just enough of the past that allows them to have esteem in what they look like. Because the reality in public school is they will see very little of themselves and be shown that all other groups done something. We know that's not true. So all I want you to do is add in enough history for them to realize the truth for themselves. Because at the end of the day, if your child is loved and has the proper amount of self-esteem, they will attack the world and be just fine. That's why it's not a mountain. That's all I'm saying to you. It's not a mountain. It's a mountain. It's a mountain when we try to think we have to deliver it to the entire group the way you said it. That's why that's a mountain. But what I'm
trying to deliver the entire group the liberation necessary to teach each of their individual families.
Right, and I'm just saying
that is the mountain we're trying to climb.
Right, but that is a very unrealistic mountain, because that is never. You're trying to climb a mountain that's a construct that has never been done and never will be done. At the end of the day,
if you had said in the year 1400,
the African diaspora, when you understand how culture is done, just understanding how culture is done makes that not something you even need to do.
See, this is the if you don't understand, and I know you do, but the people that we're talking to and about they're the recipient of 400 years of programming. I'm not asking us to solve this problem in a generation or 2 generations, but I'm saying we don't undo the 400 years of programming as a people.
I'm just telling you how to do it. You just do what we're saying.
There's a bridge that we have to cross. The cross is where do you get the critical mass to do this for?
Yeah.
Where's the critical mass coming? How do you get the critical mass?
Okay, so
that's the question. The question isn't if one family can do it.
It is. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that it just has to be one family, but you keep focused on we have to undo, and we got to start there. And all I'm simply saying to you is, no, it's as simple as I'm saying. And so then the goal is to have more media. There's media that's bigger than what I am. There's more, like my brother Eldridge Washington always say, the internet is the great, he said it a better way. It's the internet is disrespectful, is what he says. I want to get his quote right. The internet is disrespectful. So there's all kind of wonderful quality TV. There's all kind of wonderful programming. And so the masses is to continue to, like you do with any campaign for any business, is you market and propagandize where we can go look. So the work is to do that. It's not to keep saying what you keep saying. Like saying that part ain't even necessary. What's necessary is we know they're not seeing enough of themselves. We know the school is not going to do it. So the work is getting more families on the idea that they need to, and to seek out our media. That's the answer. And so when you ask me, how do you do it? It's get money behind programs like this, and people that actually put together programs like you're putting together this plate, and get it out to more people. That's what all businesses have to do.
But why aren't the schools doing it? That's the question. Why aren't they doing it?
So
I remember Shelley even brought this up one time on his show. He said, this was several years ago, Shelley Winter said, we live in a black-controlled city, a black-controlled county, and a black-controlled school district. But for whatever reason, Atlanta school system has been under black control since around the 70s or 60s, and they have yet to bring forth an Afrocentric curriculum at all. They don't. It's not even part of the curriculum that you learn African American history, and that is the majority of the school body. So at this point, we have to start looking at ourselves. When we do have the control, we aren't using it. Now back home,
Philly did it. Philly did it.
That's what I was about to say. Back home in Kentucky, they did it. Well, they didn't necessarily do it. They actually established 2 Afrocentric schools, one for boys and one for girls. So you can specifically put your child in those schools. But we're in Atlanta, and it doesn't make sense that we don't have that here.
So good point. So Emil, so what happens is the dialogue of how to, and is necessary, is the actual marketing focus. Because like James saying, in this very city, they're not taking advantage of being able to easily do it, because the marketing is, I'm telling you, being focused on we have to undo is a back, in my opinion, is a backwards focus. The focus is, it ain't hard to do. It's waking up, like James is saying, here in Atlanta, because there's no reason Atlanta shouldn't be doing what Philly's doing. It's waking them up to how necessary it is.
I mean, a part of what Emil was saying that I agree with. So the whole Atlanta thing, right? So I went to a HBCU. You expect a whole lot of black talk in the HBCU, and later on, I figured out why a lot of the stuff wasn't happening is because there's a lot of black faces, but a lot of white money preventing certain things going on.
Right.
And I don't study Atlanta school boards because I was never in APS, but I, think it may be the same thing that's going on there. And I think both of you just have 2 different approaches. And I do think that Emil's approach will fill in a lot of the gaps for your approach, Montoya. Because again, you can't teach what you don't know. And then specifically when it comes to Atlanta being a part of the upper echelon, kids in like the best private school in Atlanta for a little while, I can tell you that there may be a disinterest for the Black people who are a part of that group to go deep into Black history, all good, all bad, good and bad, right? Because we have bought into a society and a culture surrounding around class and capitalism that it is a very narrow road you could walk down when you don't look like the majority of the people in the room. Same thing with like corporate America. It's a very narrow road you can walk before the whole system that you bought into, as far as capitalism or career or whatever else, removes you because you're no longer walking that narrow road.
So just know that throughout history, there's never been a time where that's not been the case, and that's not even just capitalism. I got a comment from the comment here. Couple of comments. I'm gonna read them real quick. My man God King Consciousness says, those that don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. We are constantly repeating history. Cynthia J just said, because Black people in Atlanta want the wealth and power that white people have traditionally had, they aren't interested in Black history or seeing Black people as a whole grow. I think that's a fair comment, and I just really try to intellectually challenge the concept of a Black hole growing. And it's just, I used to believe in this wholeheartedly. But when I started to understand that it is the 10% that moves all cultures, a lot of times when we give credit to the Jewish or credit to the Asians and things of that nature, we give a widespread credit. But when you go look at actually who made this movement at this point in history, or this big invention that led to something technologically to advance that culture, wherever it wasn't all the people doing it, nor were the people that focused on that concerned with all of them. And it's like when you understand how humans have always moved, we lose a lot in trying to, but I get why we do it, because I fully understand the psychology of why we do it. It's because we were on the bad end of the 400 years. So we actually became connected through struggle. But the reality is you can't build culture through that. We've linked up a culture where we focus on the struggle so much that we have this concept that we were supposed to be all in it together. And if this person does this or does that, they'll sell out. They're not committed to, because like I said, I think what Cynthia is saying is absolutely correct. But the reality is there is no group that's doing what we're suggesting we should do by race. Even white America never did that. It was the elite did it to exploit the rest of the country, and that's how it's always been. So I'm not saying we're supposed to simply follow suit. I'm trying to mentally challenge us to lose the conversation from a standpoint of what needs to be done. I am not surprised that, Emil, again, I don't know your children, but you not know a lot of the same brothers, a lot of the same sisters, and a lot of them in our circle. We love where their children are headed, and all they needed was a little piece. That's how strong our history is. Our children are getting to 12 years with the same, like you talked about earlier, Amelia, a watered down version of even what that history is. So the pledge just has to be to our own parents, because I'm disagreeing with you, Michelle. They don't know what they don't know, but there was a time when you couldn't easily go get it. I love history. James, I know he loves history, but if you go find out why we know so much, it was a lot of time to ourselves devouring a bunch of books.
That's
and
right.
It ain't even that hard now. So it becomes easier to say with the invention of, Vice President Gore's internet, Vice President Gore's internet, right? It becomes very easy to now say we can supplement.
So, Montoya, I get what you're saying, but I'm gonna ask you a dumb question because I wanna sort of place it. But everything has this context. First of all, my comment before I ask you the dumb question is, yes, no people in history have ever done it this way. The problem with that statement is no people in history have endured what we've endured. None. There is no precedent.
That's right.
So we're in unprecedented territory already. So I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying to say that no people in history has never done this is a bit disingenuous, in that there's no people in history who's ever gone through what people in America have gone through.
I'm gonna let you make your point, but I gotta say this real quick. You can finish your point. it's not disingenuous from this standpoint. When you go look at how it's done, I could simply say we should do how it's done. You're right that nobody's been through what we've been
How
through.
what's done?
So
When you're coming from an unprecedented point, there is nobody's precedent that you can follow.
No, you don't have to have a precedent to just watch how culture and history is taught.
Well, how is it taught? Educate me. I'm a little lost here.
Okay,
so
cool.
How do the other people do it?
All right, cool. So when we say culture and values in a sense create culture, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to obviously give a kind of linear thought here so we don't have to go too deep into it. So values create culture, if you will. And so what happens is the values that a society wants, because we absolutely see right now around the world that there are very different cultures around the world. And we're foolish as humans to try to tell one culture they're right or wrong or whatever. At the end of the day, the only thing matters for any culture is if their society is functioning and advancing. So we can't tell one culture they're right or wrong. They develop it. But when they do it, they create their value systems they want at home. And all they simply want the history to do is to reinforce those values. That's why you get silly comments of, what's that? George Washington didn't lie, whatever that little silly meat, whatever. So
he chopped down the cherry tree.
Yeah, chopped down the cherry tree. So history is taught through fake stories, through real stories. But all you're doing is, if you want, because you think about a country, but let's go prior to countries. Let's just go prior to groups, and the world starts getting populated big enough to say, oh, okay, we might have to fight against them. So all the culture is doing is passing along enough history so that those children, when they get old enough, if they ever have to fight and protect themselves against another group, they have enough pride to do so. So that's why history, that's why it's his story. You tell it from your perspective. That's highly beneficial to your group. It doesn't mean you can't tell no bad. Like I said, I said that earlier, but I want to be clear. It doesn't mean you can't tell any bad. You have to tell the bad of things that you don't repeat it, especially if it happened in your own country. So I'm not saying don't tell any bad, but that's why history throughout the world focuses on the best ancestors that come from any country. If you go into a country, the history is going to be full of its heroes. It's only a few heroes. Most people don't be heroes, but they're telling you about the heroes because they want these kids to say, hey, look at what this hero did for this country. In the event that we need to protect ourselves, I hope you have enough pride in our country to make sure we maintain ourselves and not let this group take us over. That's how his story is used.
I want to know what Emil's dumb question was, and then I'll show you my prop and talk about resources.
So, Montoya, how many Russian meals have you ever made?
Like cooking Russian food?
Yeah, cooking Russian food. How many have you made?
I haven't made any.
I made beef stroganoff. Does that count?
I think that's German.
I'm talking about legitimate Russian cuisine. How many have you ever made in your whole life?
I haven't made any. I've never had Russian food myself personally. I've had a lot of cuisine, but not Russian.
But it's so easy to make. Every recipe you need is on the internet. Why wouldn't you make it if it's so easy for you to access?
I have no desire to make it.
Thank you. That's my dumb question.
So
I got the point.
So what you're hearing me hype on is, here's the reality of what our country will or may not do, as we've seen the attack on Black history. I do not falsely call that CRT. That's a false misnomer. So we saw clearly what is due. So what should we be doing, Emil? We have to ring the bell loud to make our parents aware of it is necessary. They're not doing it because we're not ringing the right bell.
You're not eating Russian food because you haven't been told to eat Russian food. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Somebody needs to tell you how good Russian food is for you to eat it. And then you can figure out what you're going to do to eat it, right?
Absolutely.
I think what is being lost here is that one, Russian food is not no. Is that we are no longer in an age where the people who need to get the information, parents or regular non-parents, are going to get it, right? And so
repeat what you said. I just want to make sure I hear you. I didn't hear you exactly what you said.
I will change what I said for clarity. So in the information age, where there's so much information coming at people, and there's social media and TikTok and everything else.
Right.
By this point, by your measure of what you said in general, is that we should all be astrophysicists because the information is out there. We all should know all of this information.
Hell no, y'all ain't hear me at all. If you think that's what I said,
okay, no,
that's
but then,
what I said.
But then, when it comes to Black history,
something I didn't say. I won't let you make a point.
Okay, all right.
I absolutely did not say. Which I understand the logic that you're using, but you're about to make a point that if I didn't make that point, you can't continue your point.
Okay, so
I need to clarify.
Scratch.
No, you're about to make a point to something I did not say. I can't let you do that because you're making a point to something I did not say.
Okay, so
let me clarify what I said, and then hear your point to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did not say we should all be astrophysicists because it's out there. That's not what I said. What I said is when you understand how history is taught, then it becomes imperative if we simply say, okay, if you say, tell me I'm talking to the choir in this group, not saying you're wrong about that. I'm not disagreeing with that part. But I am saying that if we're talking to the choir, I am imploring even the choir to understand the importance of creating a marketing campaign to share what they need to implement with their children. Since we can fight for the schools to do it, but if we're honest that that's the fight that we're losing, if we're not going to come up with a supplement plan for what we do and promote that plan, then we keep getting the results and we're not even attempting to do anything about it. So I didn't say we should be astrophysicists. I'm talking about if we consider that this is very important. When I say very important, I'm not talking about knowing all of our history. It's so powerful. Our children don't need but a little bit, because at the end of the day, what they need is esteem. The way they go through 12 years of school now, they psychologically, because we probably went through this process ourselves, they psychologically have to get their esteem. So it ain't typically for our generation. What was it? We would get to college, get a little piece of our history, and then learn so much and be like, damn, why was I never taught that? And you kind of walk around with the pride that you didn't even psychologically know you did not have until you got a piece. So when you understand how simple it is, if we make the task Emil's mountain of saying we got to come up with a concept for all, when it's as simple as parents, make sure the school system is not going to do this. And here it is. I'm not offering this as though it's a fix for all. I am offering it. I am simplifying it because I'm right about what to do. And if we would take it on verbally as let's figure out how to announce doing this versus spending time saying, how do we save everybody? Which there will never be an answer because no group has ever moved that way. Then we will never get no results because we're trying to move in a way that's unrealistic. But it is very realistic to do what I'm suggesting it and announce it very loud.
I don't think anybody's saying save everybody, although it sounds that way. I think we're saying save as many as we can.
Well, you said we must have to climb this mountain. You said we have to do that. You said we have to do that. It's not about
the effort has to be as broad as possible. Absolutely, but that doesn't imply that a broad effort, just like your marketing campaign, may be targeted, but you're still going to try to reach the maximum number of people that market it.
Right, and I just say it. So stop saying it's calling them out. Like, get that out of the language.
No, we agree if the answer is we're not trying to get everybody onto the same sheet of music at the same time, but I am not going to abandon the effort to get a broad message to as many as possible, because I believe that in order to stimulate that appetite for the food you want people to consume, you're going to have to hit them in multiple dimensions.
So what you just said is what I'm saying. Broadcast it to as many people as possible. I'm just saying stop spending time on we have to get focused on what was done to us first. Like, no, we can do what I'm saying without being focused on that. I'm saying leave that part out of it.
What we're trying to do is prevent a repeat of history. So yes, you always contextualize the past so that your history guides your effort. That doesn't mean you are bound by it, but you are guided by it. That means you give it the proper respect. You make sure you account for it, because you're dealing with the people who've been traumatized for 400 years. To say that that's not true or that doesn't have any bearing in your effort
I never said it. I never said it's not true. Heck no, I've never said it's not true. I've never said that at all, because it's very true. And I'm just simply saying, here's how you do it. And so the do it includes what you just said. You can do what you just did with your kids. I'm not saying don't do it. You got to give context. There's no discussion without context. There's no conversation, no understanding without context. So what I am not saying is tell history without context. I just said we as a culture, when we get focused on the construct of race and worried about what the school systems want to do, we spend a lot of time looking for a solution based on an entire construct. That's unrealistic. Go ahead. Oh, I thought somebody was saying something.
No, I get every point you're saying, but here's I guess the nuance that sometimes gets lost in this conversation is neither one of us is saying we need to save everybody.
Here it is. I never speak in absolutes. So since I'm not speaking in absolutes, then don't address me as if I was. What I am saying is the language.
I agree with you. I agree with you that way.
Did not.
I guess the part that I
didn't take your language. I didn't take your language to mean all, because humans don't when people think absolute, they typically will say all. So I didn't receive you to mean all either. What I am challenging you is every time when I say here's what you do, you always want to revert. And you're not the only person. That's why I'm just saying you, because you're on this conversation. But I hear this quite often. You always want to revert to what well, first, the foundation is you're trying to reach a people who have went through this. I very well know they went through it. This is called mental dialogue. We're trying to do our version of Dr. DeGrasse's work, if I always say her name wrong, but post-traumatic enslavement, traumatic, whatever. So we're trying to do that work in a practical way. So I'm challenging you that the language in which we speak can be detrimental even in doing it. And I'm just saying you always, and not because I'm saying you because you're, again, I want to be clear, just you because you and I are talking, but I hear what you say quite often. And all I know is the world's advancing. And even when other cultures have had and know their bad history, like the Jewish community is amazing at telling their history, not just the Holocaust history, right? That's not it. But culture knows about it wholeheartedly. So I am not saying that we should not know about it. Where I challenged you is the way history will get told from a public school standpoint. And you have to be careful on what you think might and might not be included. But don't confuse me making that distinction for public education as if I'm suggesting that you don't give your own children context. The loud message that I'm pushing out here is for more of our culture to realize that the one thing they're missing in school that could help them greatly is for you as a parent to supplement, because there is psychological esteem that will be missing. It's almost like, what's the white lady that did the brown blue eye test? What's her name? Jane Elliott.
Mm-hmm.
I remember she was on this 60-minute interview one time, and
you called her name.
Yep. She was in a 60-minute interview one time, and this Indian guy asked her, I think it was 60 minutes, but if I might be wrong about which broadcast. But when he asked her, he says, so she goes, so are you telling me all white people are racist? And she goes, and I'm a bad paraphrase of her, but she said something to the effect of, if they went through 12 years of primary education and are not, then they must have failed history class.
Yep, that's right.
So follow what I'm saying here. If we can agree with her there, that's what our babies are getting when we're saying go get your good grades, and they should be going to get good grades. So that's a good thing. But if we don't supplement their history, if Jane Elliott is right about what she said, that's the history our black kids got. So I'm saying they can do well in school, and it ain't that much more work for you to supplement, and it don't take knowing all of our history to do so.
I think that's true. And the reason why I'm willing to go out on that limb and say it's not that much more work is because it was a hell of a lot of work for me to educate myself, and I knew I was deficient.
So,
I
what
think
about your children now that you did the work, though?
Oh, I agree, but we're not talking about me or you. We're talking about parents who do not have the base from which we created our historical knowledge.
Right.
So we're talking about people. You're saying to people, get them hungry with this marketing, and then you're saying give them the input, give them the tools to educate their children. And what I'm saying is, getting them hungry is a bigger road to hoe than we're giving it credit.
That's all I'm focused on. So you can't tell me I'm not giving it big enough credit. That's the whole focus. That's the whole focus. Because of what you just said is why that should be the focus.
I don't have a problem with that. I'm happy to converge on a solution that makes sense to both of us. The key question is, how do we get people hungry who have been traumatized? I don't use any other culture because no other culture has had their language, history, and culture stripped from them intentionally and then kept from them over years. Even today, with all the resources we have available to us, we still cannot recreate any of our languages or cultures because we don't know where we're from. So we can't use a parallel like the Jewish people. We can't use the Chinese people who have intact language and culture.
So once you realize that's not necessary, you can stop talking like that.
That what's not necessary?
So what's not necessary is the unreality of being able to recreate what's lost.
But you're using other cultures who did use those things that we cannot recreate to reconstruct themselves. You can't use those cultures as a reference and then say that what they did we can't do, therefore it's okay.
So here it is. In most cases, they didn't have to reconstruct. They was never lost. So they continue to construct themselves.
Well, that's the point, I think.
Correct. That's the
point. So here it is. Here it is. So what happens is you start constructing now.
So you're saying don't go back to get something because you can't get it. Just start from now, or basically from the 20th century.
So what I'm saying is there is no reality to reconstructing the lost languages. There's no reality to us finding out what our names were prior to taking to the enslavement names. And I'm saying there's a lot of energy spent on that part of the conversation. Because that's the reality that happened to us. Mm-hmm. And what happens is it is stagnant to focus on that part, the parts that we cannot recover. That doesn't mean I'm saying don't learn any history, don't learn any bad stuff. I am highlighting that because what I'm saying to Emil, I used to say. So let me say that as well. And so there's always this dialogue of, are you learning in a sense? And what we say is very important. So without unknowingly, what you speak is most important. And so if you keep speaking to the part that you can't even get anyway, that's a lot of energy. When I get my wife, I think, and I help kids with this after school all the time. When I get my wife, have my kids, I'm going to supplement. And I'm telling you, in supplementing, it doesn't require that my kid learn as much history as I learned. I just need them to see enough of themselves because I don't want them to go through 12 years and end up like Jane Elliott talked about, because that's what the public school education on its own will do. All I need my kid is to
The
have.
word enough is broad and vague, and this is a. I
So
agree with
you're
you
coming
in
up,
theory, but I
yeah.
taught my children personally because my
Mhm.
wife is from Zimbabwe. I took my children to Zimbabwe. They knew that part of their family. I told them the stories of
As you
my
should.
back as far as that I could tell them, and as I discover more, I told them even as adults.
Nice.
But there's a whole bunch of us who do not have what I had available to me to filter to my children. So
So
when
so
we say
so for
enough,
those so for
we
them
can't
whole
just say enough. It has to
so
be
here it
very
is. For those
clear.
whole bunch of people, so those whole bunch of people, let's be honest. Right now, do they know to do what I'm suggesting? Do they even know to do what I'm suggesting?
No.
Okay, so here we go. Watch this. So if I tell you all the money should be spent on them even knowing that they should, that even them doing a little is much better for the entire culture than what's being done right now. So what happens is the start and need of it is a huge benefit. And that's the kind of starting from now that becomes necessary. Because at the end of the day, you got to remember what the goal is. We have a idealistic view of what the goal is because of the struggle that we've been, and we get bought. I said, I'll keep using this language. We get bought into the entire construct. The goal is the only goal is the proper amount of psychological esteem. So when I say that ain't much, right now I know nothing's getting done, and we're watching what's playing out to all those lot of people that you're talking about, Ebil. We're watching it play out because they're not even doing a little. I want to start the messaging with do the little.
I
I'm
can
not
agree with
I'm
that.
not stopping. I'm not stopping the message at that. But when we ain't even doing the little, that needs to be loud and clear and the push. And I don't want to hear about all the reasons it won't work.
Well, I'll just enter in that I'm a Pan Africanist, so I think you can go back and learn those things. We have DNA tested and things of that nature. I was having a discussion with a brother from South Africa the other day, was talking about family structures, and he was like, we don't do that. I said, yes, we are. I said, brother, we're still Africans. We're just kidnapped. We're Africans who were kidnapped and transplanted to North America. And a lot of the things that you found there, you will find here, but it's been translated into a post-slavery narrative. He was talking about like how they basically have the familiar ties where if your brother dies, you're responsible for the kids. I said, well, we don't necessarily do that because it's a capitalist society. I was like, I can't even enroll your child into school unless I get your permission. So, but I said, I didn't get to tell him, but I'm like, why do you think we call each other brothers and sisters? So we still have a lot of those Africanisms even here in North America. And I think that's important too. We always stop at slavery, which is why people don't necessarily want to learn history because most of the stuff we focus on is very dark history. We don't talk about the history of Africa. We don't talk about the triumphs. We usually talk about the pitfalls, so people don't want to hear it. They don't talk about it. I was talking to a friend about that with my grandmother. My grandmother didn't tell me a lot of things, and he says, your grandmother, who was born in the 1920s in Mississippi, went to the grave with a lot of stories she took with her because they were probably very painful. Because you just have to imagine what was going on in the country in 1920 and what kind of life a black woman born in Mississippi in the 1920s experienced.
It's a good thing she didn't tell you those stories. Go ahead, Michelle.
I'm a Keon. I'm a Pan Africanist too, and I believe that there is no us without going back as far as we can and bringing as much as we can. But a lot of what you say is already here in the context, and we just need to contextualize it. We're already brothers and kin and sisters and kin to our African family, but we have to be clear and say that out loud. What we have today is a survival tactic that was based on and has been battle tested through 400 years of trial and tribulation. That is an amazing accomplishment. It's not negative that we went through it. What's positive, what's powerful is that we have so many beautiful traditions that started in Africa,
Yeah.
that went through the fires of testing and have come through in 2022 as things that we can tell our children exist because they were so strong, so rooted, that through
Yeah.
all of the hell, we still have them.
It's interesting you
That's
said
a giant
that.
win.
Michelle's
That's
waiting.
a giant win.
Oh,
Michelle's
she got to
waiting.
say
Go ahead,
something.
Michelle.
Okay.
I finally saw the gap between you, Montoya, and Emil. And I think Montoya, you're working on the tipping point and planting seeds. And Emil is more macro level. And I still agree with both of y'all. But having
I'll just let you finish. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
all right. And so as far as parents and resources, because I'm going to move the train down the track a little bit, right? So I'm a parent. I have a child somewhere, right? And we do a lot of supplementing. He's sick, so we can't do too much supplement because you can't send little Huey to the $30,000 a year private school. Don't work. I get called up to the school. We got problems. We actually, real quick, we actually had a problem in pre-K where because we only have black books. Any book in this house with a person in it, the person is brown of hue, right? And so it was like a Jack and Jill, one of them little fairy tale books, right? But he only knew it as brown people. So when he went to school, he took it upon himself to get a brown crayon and make all the people brown, right? And then so I really can't fight with the baby because the baby is like, well, they was the wrong color, mommy. And I was like, you right. We're gonna go get ice cream. But real quick, I went to go get this prop a while. It's not even a prop. I have this scroll. You can't see it. Back up. I have this scroll. It is this long, this tall rather, and it is like 10, 15, 20, 30. I don't even know how long this is, but I don't have a wall in my house long enough for this damn thing. I don't even know why I got the big one because I had options, right? It keeps going. It doesn't stop,
Beautiful.
right?
Beautiful.
And so I have this for supplemental history because I'm a product of being the smart kid. I'm a product of being in AP Black history classes and AP world history classes. So I'm supposed to be getting more than what the average student does. And in fact, I'm getting less. I'm getting everything that's whitewashed in my history, always and forever, from kindergarten to hell, the master's program, started with slavery. And that long scroll, I unwound a good 3/4 of the way through. I wasn't even done unwinding it. It shows Black history from the earliest, very beginnings of Black history till I think it's like 2011 or 2012, right?
Right.
And so I have no expectation whatsoever that my child will ever know half of
Not necessary.
what's in here, right?
There's nobody in the world that knows that much history unless they're a history enthusiast.
Exactly. But like to Montoya's point, it's that seed and that tipping point, right?
Yes, him coloring in the thing, you're doing what you're supposed to do.
And so, I mean, as far as the coloring goes, you know, I gave those people back $10 for their little book, for the little funky book, and we call it a day. But when he goes to high school, there'll be bigger repercussions for his actions, right? But that again, that's a different story for a different day. So as far as parenting and resources, maybe.
See, we shouldn't assume the
really
worst.
all depends on what school.
That's part of the dialogue of where I'm going. We shouldn't assume the worst with that.
True.
That's part of where that's the psychology that we have to overcome. That's because we always see it that way.
I mean, as a mother of a Black boy.
But it is. Yeah, what happens is, all I'm saying is, you already assume that there will be bigger consequences. All I'm simply saying is, you already gonna have to deal with them in life as they come. You don't need to be assuming the worst.
I respect the ideal of what you said.
I'm trying to language at all times.
Okay, again, I absolutely respect the ideal of what you said. mother any race, nationality, whatever, caste, whatever, because that's nothing we didn't talk about as far as the diaspora, is that we have caste systems in places where it's all black, but you got hues and you have other issues
But
as far
that's
as
what
caste.
humans always
But
do. That's why
yeah,
it becomes silly to have this concept that we could be. I'll challenge these brothers here that you can even be Pan-African. That is literally a construct that was given to us. The continent itself has never been there. It never will be. There's no group that ever will be. We've bought into a construct that is completely unrealistic. And when we come up with solutions within it, they will never work. That's why they can't work. Humans do not do what people are suggesting by the color of someone's skin. Humans have never done
The
it.
European Union is no good. It doesn't work at all. It's not dominating the world right now where every country in the world speaks a European language. I don't believe that. Pan-Africanism isn't we're all speaking the same language, we're all listening to the same music. It is a union of African people who have decided that their interests do not overlap with European and Asian people in the way that they do right now. They don't. So that definition is a straw man. That is not the definition of Pan-Africanism, that we are all trying to be lockstep. It does mean
I didn't suggest that we're trying to be
people working in concert with one another the same way the European Union works in concert with itself.
Exactly.
There is a precedent for that.
And so,
we know how
somehow,
It's a precedent for Asians too.
we have the East
somehow,
African Economic
you as
Community.
an American, so you as an American, because I'm absolutely cool with Africa doing that, but you as an American are finna be part of it.
Yes, because you're African.
Okay, so
You happen to live in America, but you are a descendant of Africa.
We represent the region of the African
Union. Where are people that are not from Europe doing what the heck you talking about?
That are not from Europe?
Yeah, that are doing.
Yes, they are. It's called the Atlantic Council. What are you talking about? The Atlantic Council. NATO is America. We're not European, but the European Union and NATO and the Atlantic Council all work hand in hand.
I'm sorry, say it again.
And it's just different levels and variations on how you do it too. That's the part you're missing. Asians do it all the time. You see,
do what all the time?
They basically unify. They basically support each other.
Where you get this from?
When's the last time you saw an Asian family driving in a Ford?
Okay, so you need to go listen to the show of what can African Americans learn from Chinese Americans. Go listen to that show, and you'll be shocked. No groups do what you're talking about.
They do it in different ways.
Chinese and Japan do not come together that way. Chinese and Koreans do not come together the way you're talking about. No group is a monolithic like you're saying.
The Chinese created an empire. Those people were not even the same at one point. Okay. We call it China because of the Qin dynasty.
When you use, this is something that you got. I'm gonna use. You just asked that little example you just gave. When you understand that immigrants are the best of the world typically because they either have the means to move or they are the best of their people. And so when you compare, when you say, when the last time you see the Asian moving the forward, I know that most African Americans are not as poor as Chinese in China because we don't put things in real context.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm talking about
that when you put it in the context you're putting it in, you're buying into this race construct that is not realistic.
I'm talking more about group economics and community and things of that nature.
Right. And no group does what we say they do.
So, Montoya, how do we not buy into the race construct?
I'm sorry, say it again, Michelle.
How do we not buy into the race construct when race is all around us?
Right.
It's
very difficult. Very good question. I'm gonna get off this thing in a few minutes. But great question. So I am not naive to what I'm saying is something that's easy for people to get. What I am doing is, now that I fully understand the psychology of what's happened and realize the details of how the construct was put together, because I have spent too much time studying that, if you will. So when I come to understand it, right now it's the seeds of waking people up to it's not a real thing. Not a real thing as if it's fake. Because remember, before I started, I said there are still real life consequences. There could be life or death. So because of that, it is very difficult to get people off of it. But you can never get off of it if you never even hear it.
This is what I'm going to say. When Africans come over here, they quickly learn who they are and what they are in this society, and they gravitate towards us. My professors in school were Nigerian, my economic professors. I had a finance professor who was Somali. I have a very good friend who's Ethiopian. Now, even though his ancestors come from the other side of the continent, East Africa, he still understands the concept of black and black unity, that he basically deals with us as opposed to the Europeans, because almost everyone around this planet knows these things and what has been done historically by European imperialism. So they recognize that there is a unity in and of that. And like one of my professors told me in history class, he says, if you study anthropology, it takes over 1,000 years for a group to be separated from its primary source before they become what's considered a separate and unique people.
Right.
We've only been apart from our home approximately, depending on when we came here for the most part, between 200 to 400 years. He says we're really still the same people, but because of everything that has happened, because of European interference, we have that connection has been severed. He says if we work together, we can bring it back, and we need to before we lose it.
I think I think we're having a thing with culture, like culturally being apart, and race. Because what I got from what Montoya was saying is that race isn't real, which he is correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
If again, and I don't think that, and it could just be me because I've been thinking about this since I was like 7. I don't think that people think that race, the idea of race, is real, as far as it's a real, tangible, real life thing. Maybe I'm wrong.
We identified around it my entire life before I learned otherwise was dedicated to my blackness. It's very real.
Okay, true. Okay, so if I take the idea of race, right? And I say, all right, I'm no longer subscribing to race, right? I can also look around me, especially as an American and as a capitalist, because that's the game I bought into, right? And say, well, in that case, money's not real because it's the fiat currency.
Yeah.
So it's not real. But we all have to believe in money for it to work. So with that same thought, do we all have to believe in race for our society to work?
No, because what happens is race, when I say it's not real, I am simply saying scientifically. The idea of humans figuring out how they want to exchange values has been existing before there was even money. So humans at the end of the day will always try to figure out how to exchange value for value, whatever they call that, whether that be money, whether that be Bitcoin, whether that be land, whether that be cows. So humans figure out commerce, always have, always will, some way, somehow. I'm simply so I understand the analogy, but I'm killing it with when I say race is a construct. There is nothing scientifically real about it, and we know that it got implemented intentionally, chasing the money, follow the money. So the money is how it became the construct that it did. You know what I mean? Like if you ever go put the numbers to what was being made to actually ship enslaved here. Like if you put that money in today's money, you know what I mean? Like you a multi-millionaire. You understand?
That's right.
So that construct was created strictly for the money by those very aware that there's nothing real about this inferiority shit, but we'll use it if it's gonna make us money. And
well, they made it real when they started using pseudoscience and pseudo religion and things of that nature.
Of course,
but so that's what I was saying. Like race isn't real as far as that goes, right? Because like the science of race isn't real. Like racism is real, right? Yeah. So again, Montoya, how do we as Black people, the choir, right? The Pan-Africans on the panel as well. How do we unsubscribe? Because I didn't get the email to unsubscribe to race. How do I do that? And more importantly, how do I teach my child to do that?
I'm not unsubscribing because I live in a racist society, and for me to do that is dangerous and puts me in danger.
So safely as well. How do we safely unsubscribe?
I think you may have missed. I started out before I started talking about this, James, where this has very real life consequences.
Exactly.
Hold on. Oh yeah, so you missed that part.
No, I heard what you said. I agree
Okay,
with you.
so I'm definitely not being naive when I said it has real life consequences.
Yeah.
So you can't speak to me as if I'm
No.
disregarding that. So that shouldn't be a part of our dialogue. So you shouldn't, in my opinion, because I'm clearly realizing it is a very real thing. Michelle is a Black mother. We constantly talk about that she has a son. So I've written poems about how realistic, which like, for example, on the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, I don't know if you ever heard this, Michelle, but I would ask that for the rest of your life, you never watch another police shooting. I'm talking about the psychology of I'm not going to go into that here. We've done a whole show on it.
I've heard you. I heard you say it before. So yeah.
Okay, so you're familiar with that. So I'm going here, James, because I'm showing you how much I'm identifying how real racism is. So when I say that race is not real, I'm not foolishly also saying racism is not.
Oh yes.
So let's get that very clear, because again, whatever we perceive is real. So our country perceives it, it's real, it has real consequences.
Yeah.
What I am challenging, and Michelle got it when she says I'm hearing these seeds. So what I am challenging is when I come to understand how culture and groups move and do and thrive, whatever their circumstances are, they all do it the exact same way as what I've seen. And so when I'm talking about this, so when I say that race is not real, then I want to disavow this group thing based on race, when no group has ever done that, and nor should they, because culture is built on something real. If you build it on race and it's not real, none of those solutions will ever be successful. And we mistakenly talk about other groups in the construct of race. And when you go inside those groups, that ain't even their consideration or how they're doing it.
I hear what you're saying, but the challenge is, even though they're not in the room right now, when the white people hear this, see, I told you it has nothing to do with race, and you need to stop counting.
I'm not talking to them, so I don't care.
I know you're not talking to them, but what you say, the words you say resonate outside of this echo chamber.
I'm only trying to reach us, because we don't
want to. Even with us, some of us buy into that.
Michelle Kid do what he's doing, he is on the path. Because remember, I said the ultimate goal. See, Emil, my brother, as you say, mentioning the macro level, had this mountain he was trying to climb. And I was like, get out of the language of the mountain, because you must remember that the only goal is for Michelle's son to have the right amount of psychological esteem. Everything that we're worried about that we do to us and we wish we would do better is coming from not knowing that part and having enough. So if the only goal is for Michelle's son and our children and Emil's children to have the right amount of psychological esteem, because we know 12 years of primary school will not give them that, because that's all your child needs is the amount of love and esteem that they need. If we make the goal bigger than that, hell no, we're never going to do it. But if you understand it's that simple, and when I find out that's what everybody else is doing around the world, and this is what works, then we can do that too.
Well, I think here's the challenge. Where does the group collective start, and where does the individualism end? Because what I'm hearing is some of the same talk I've heard from Euro Americans. Basically, it's individual. It's on your individual effort. And if you would stop worried about being Black and just work, you will make it, because your race has nothing to do with the effort that you extend and export.
I hope the last sentence you just said is some BS. That means you ain't listening. If you're gonna say, I'm acknowledging the very realism of it. So
you did, but it's two sides of the same coin.
Go ahead.
They're two sides of the same coin, so that's the issue that I'm having the issue with.
Well, you have, but I didn't say that, so don't bring it into this conversation.
That's how I understand it. That's how I hear it. That's how I interpret it.
Okay, well, that's a bad interpretation.
That's fine. I'm asking for clarification.
Yep,
educate me.
That's why we're doing what we're doing right now.
Amen.
Yep. So I clearly am acknowledging how real it is. So there's no way what I'm saying is including, oh, don't worry about it, it's not even a real thing. So clearly I'm not saying that.
No, you're not saying that.
Right. And so the dialogue is for our community. And so as long as we understand it, because what happens is, keep it. I'm gonna give you this example, and we'll close the night out.
All right.
So there was this. I need to go look this. I should look this person up for me, y'all. I don't know if we can look him up. But there was this jock in maybe the 1910s, maybe 20s. I don't think it was 30s. It might be maybe as late as the 30s. But early 1900s, there was this horse jockey, this brother.
Isaac Murphy?
That might be his name. I don't know. Yep.
I'm a Kentuckian, so I know about black.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you can. Right. I ain't never surprised. You always got the history.
Even he was not on the poster. I don't know who y'all talking about. He was not on the poster.
So Isaac Murphy, that's probably who we were talking about, was the best jockey in the world during these early hundreds or whatever. He was a little small. Jockeys always have to be small anyway.
Yes.
Whatever. So he gets very successful, right?
Yeah.
Messes around, marries a white woman.
Yeah.
Lead the daggum country.
Yeah.
I think he goes to France or I get the order mixed up. I think he went to Russia first, then France. Either way, because of the death threats on his life for messing with a white woman, he moves to Russia, who always accepts us even back then. You know what I mean? Over there or whatever. And he's still the best jockey in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? Still killing it because he can't live in America, but all the other races, he's killing it. Another place because stuff happened there. And so I'm bringing this to say, I'm pointing this out to just recognize.
I know who you're talking about, too. I'm looking up his name.
Right. With enough love and enough esteem, your children are equipped to navigate the world. This is the goal of all groups. They typically we would like to have more of our kids, right? So that's why you get public education, right? So the reality is our country is mixed. We know our notorious history in this country. So I agree with James. In Atlanta, we shouldn't have a problem with this. In Philly, we shouldn't have a problem with this. In Jackson, Mississippi, we shouldn't have a problem with this. Foolish to think that other places where we're too spread out and not enough of us that we could control, because local school systems can be controlled locally. So James is right. We should do it. Like we all agreed, there's not a loud enough bullhorn explaining that we need to do it. And Michelle's right. The money that controls these schools don't make it simple either. So I will give her a great point by her. It's not that I'm not acknowledging certain things, but I'm trying to walk through this entire thing to kind of point out. I'm not saying don't worry about race. I'm just telling you at the end of the day, if the goal is to properly, because at the end of the day, I don't even care what the media shows my kid if I got them properly esteemed up. The reason the media fucks up our children is because they're not have the proper esteem. So if I can get my child right, a damn gangster rap song is not finna influence my kid. So
I think you're talking about Wingfield. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Thank you for that.
All right,
but
welcome.
My only point with that is realize what the goal is. But if we have this overall cover the mountain and we got to figure out a way to teach all our kids, and the way to do it is what Michelle's doing, and to get more people doing what Michelle's doing, we'll get more kids doing that than are not doing that. And if we can keep spreading that value, the same way that you always hear me get on the marriage before children. So I know that there can be no success on what we need to do. Just like Nike can't get us in a Jordan line without spending $1 billion on marketing every year. So I realize in business, everything requires marketing. So the things that we need, we got to market. And so we keep shooting to, we need to have this big, broad base answer, and we ain't even marketed enough of us doing it. So that's just, like I said, the tipping point. I like that. That's what I'm focused on, because I know we can get nowhere if we don't even get started on the tipping point.
You said you were going to close it out.
Yeah, go ahead.
But
I'm out.
I still think that there is an obstacle before the marketing campaign begins to ring the bell, right?
I'm open to that.
So mine is preaching to the choir, right? I take that back. Even with preaching to the choir, there are still resources and time and everything else that goes into, I got that headboard that goes into educating children in general, especially when you talk about us as a people and just economically where we are, and how we typically have one parent female run households, just stat wise,
Yeah,
right?
84%, unfortunately.
Working I think it was like 1.7 jobs. So you got like a main job and you got a part-time job.
Okay.
And then you're taking care of, I think it was 2 point whatever kids. So multiple children.
So we about to start talking about how it can't be done, because I said we
No,
can't.
no. I give us no excuse, because I know our history and I know how powerful and I know how great of a people we are. But we have to provide an outline or something. We got to give cliff notes.
That ain't hard.
It ain't hard. It ain't hard. It's doable. So before we start this marketing campaign,
you just pulled up one.
that was like $120.
Okay, it is.
If like my social economic standing was what it used to be.
You're still speaking to like what we're
No, I'm not. So okay,
how it can't
so
be done.
What I am trying to accomplish with my words is that here is the obstacle. Here's what we have to. Here's the gap. Here's what we have to do to fill that gap. I'm down for the cause. Let's do it, and then we can run the marketing campaign.
Nope, you're actually backwards still.
Okay, go ahead.
Because we already agreed there is no desire. You don't get the desire without the marketing.
So how do we make it desirable, right? Because like I'm on TikTok, I ain't got no business being on there, and I follow a lot of Black people who talk about like New Orleans culture specifically, or like Geechee culture, or just like culture and outside of race, because on occasion they'll have like demelanated people in there, and while they're telling stories, and so I like those type of stories. So how do we make it desirable if it's not a knee jerk like or desire or whatever?
Well, it can't be desirable if we like so if you, I think you're understanding the nuance that I kept speaking to.
I got it.
So it ended up being a fight, because I'm even having to wake up the choir to just this part. And I kept saying, don't talk about that part. Don't talk about that part. Don't talk about that part. Because part of what we're talking about makes it less desirable. If I got to go relive all that, I don't want to hear about it.
That's true.
So you just got me. I'm focused on the psychology. Mm-hmm. So if I got to wake up the intelligent people to who already got it to what it takes, that's the start. The choir is speaking the wrong language to make it desirable.
Okay, so how do you, Montoya bell ringer of all the bells, right? How stop it, Cam. So how do you, right? How do you communicate that nuance without the argument? Because when I got what you were saying, I agreed.
I'm fully prepared to do these arguments. That's why we're on this show.
But the thing is, like, you don't have to do the argument. So, like, people are just not confrontational, right? But it's like both of you were saying the same thing 90% of the time. No, it was just that gap.
That language he was using the same as what I'm saying. That macro
is point.
The wrong way to go.
Okay, so Malcolm and Martin, right? So like the mission and the point were similar to a certain point, right?
Yeah.
And
don't
so
with the objective. I'll give you that as our objectives. Well, I'll say they're similar.
Yeah, similar.
But I reject the concept of, remember, his initial thought is we, and who is we? Now I know he doesn't mean all. He's generalizing, so I don't like nobody to generalize mine. I'm not generalizing him. Mm-hmm. But his we is this mythical thing that no group has ever done. So I have to wake up us, because I mythically was looking for that most of my life. It's a foolish path. I'm willing to say that now because I understand how wrong it is.
Okay, so how do you convey your micro tipping point, 10%, right? So your seeds to a group who thinks that large, because we have a large problem. So they're trying to come up with large solutions, right?
Right.
So how do you take that without being
how
confrontational?
do you eat an elephant?
I guess one bite at a time, but
That's
okay.
if I'm taking one bite at a time, I'm mental dialogues here doing the work. There is no other answer than to take one bite at a time.
Okay.
And to encourage y'all that support this movement to become a member so that this type of dialogue can reach more people because we're sharing it. And I'm
not in Atlanta anymore, but I was a member for like 6 months.
Right. So this work still needs support.
And so I'm definitely down for the cause, and I also want to know what Emil's play was as well, because I'm only 2 hours away. Yeah. I think that this conversation was better than what I thought it was gonna be when I hopped on here, because like my YouTube wasn't working, so I had to hop on the actual stream thing, and then you started talking to me. So, so I really think that it was good. I think that it was needed because I didn't think about it your way, right? And again, the point is to never convert or evangelize. It's to just get somebody to think about it in a different way. And I just plugged your whole show for you right there.
Yeah, just my 3 cents. And you know, if the work is viable, then it does require your support because we're competing against Nike's 1 billion. We're competing, you know what I'm saying? The distraction of be like Mike ain't helping your child. And so the dialogue becomes not just
he wears lights up Walmart shoes, like that's his thing. If it don't got a cartoon character on it,
I'm making a point. So part of the next step is you asking me the question: if we're doing these unique dialogues one bite at a time, support it to make sure it can keep it happening, and share it so that it spreads, because that becomes part of the work too. Imagine this much work and people who love it don't support it. That's always.
Send me a membership link again.
Absolutely. Tonight. There it is.
I got you.
But that's part of the propaganda. That's part of the spreading what we need. That's part of the work. Appreciate you, Queen. All right. Thank y'all. Enjoyed you. Jamar, I know that's you, brother. So thank you for watching. I didn't expect to go 2 hours because I just popped the show up. So thank you, Michelle, for helping carry the show. I love the dialogue. Again, for me, it ain't about being right. It's just pushing the envelope, pushing the opinions, because I think people can learn from all the opinions. That's ultimately the goal. But I am challenging the psychology. That's what we do at Mental Dialogue, because you cannot act right if you do not think right. And with that said, I think we did an amazing show. Thank you, James, for jumping on with us. I think we made it make sense and we raised the culture. See y'all hopefully next week. I'm gotta go take care of my family with some stuff. So hopefully I'll get a chance to do a show next week. But this Saturday, I will have the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. We may be doing who supports Black men, or it might be, are we too married to struggle? I got to figure out what show I'm gonna do tomorrow. But I'll start promoting it on the Mental Dialogue Facebook page and the Mental Dialogue IG page, which is mental_dialogue. And Michelle, I will stay on it when I go out the show. Stay on. So I'm gonna send you the link. I'm gonna send you a link in the backstage. So stay on when I end it. I'm about to end it.
All right, now talk to y'all later. Good night.